Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net. I've got an all new camera and I would like to hear your thoughts about it because we're going to start an all new series today. This is called Tales from IT. I know that most of the content on my YouTube channel has to do with gaming and gaming technology and things like that, and I've been doing Let's Plays as of recently, but I do a lot of IT work in my spare time, and I've got some great stories that I've been telling peers that are just sick of listening to me tell them. So I thought maybe the time was right. I got this all new camera. I want to do more with it. So I'd love to hear your comments about what I should do with this camera. But I thought maybe I could share some of my favorite stories from the IT trenches with all of you because I think it's really exciting. So this story I'm about to tell you guys has to do with a story that happened probably around 2 years ago, I would say. And it's a story that it does have a happy ending, but it was a bit of a complex story, and it mostly involves a lot of I'm going to tell you do not do this and do not do this and under no circumstances do this. Well, I had a client a couple of years ago that had pretty much done everything you possibly could imagine wrong. They had a very important database that they were currently hosting on a computer that was over 7 years old, still running Windows XP at the time. And this was at a time when Windows 8 was just on its way out. So that just tells you immediately how old the system had to have been if it was still running Windows XP. It was failing. Now, under normal circumstances, a computer that's running 7 years old that is failing like that is, you don't even need to diagnose that. It's basically the computer is failing because it's so old. It could be the hard drive, it could be the RAM, but even if you did replace whatever had broken, there's no point. You might as well just get something that's brand new. And that was the advice that I was getting ready to tell my client until they told me, "Well, you don't understand. We have a database on here that is essential for my business." The man was a carpenter. He woodworker, whatever you want to call him. I don't know exactly the word, but he built cabinets and he built tables out of wood. He ran all of his invoices. His wife basically was trained on how to operate the database. The database was fully custom for them. It was made for them, I guess, years and years and years ago. Um, and so it handled all billing, all invoices, all receipts, all incoming jobs, all outgoing jobs. Now, don't get me wrong. The guy's wife knew how to run the database. She knew how to do data input and data removal and run invoices. So she knew how the database itself worked quite well. But she didn't know anything about why it worked. She didn't make it. It was made by another client of his years and years and years ago. She had no idea if it was custom. She had no idea. Neither one of them did. She had no idea who had made it. Or no, they knew. I'm sorry. They knew who had made it, but they had no idea what was it running on, what kind of software it was using. No, they had no clue, and there were no backups of the database. They knew nothing about computers. They didn't know how to run a backup. They didn't know that they needed a backup module. They just assumed that the computer would run forever. Yeah. So I looked at them after. I thought to myself, okay, now in my line of work, at least it's my historical perspective, that usually I don't get a call until we're way past the point of no return. In some cases, when a computer's parts start to fail, sometimes you get a little bit of wiggle room, basically, where you can actually do something to preserve the data that's currently on there before the part fails entirely. Obviously, I got called after that fact. Like I said, they knew nothing about what was running on that system. They didn't know anything about. They didn't even know it was running Windows. They couldn't even tell me what operating system it was running. I only knew this because I was able to get the computer working for about 3 to 4 minutes before it crashed hard. So I turned the computer on for a couple of minutes, basically just to check to see if whatever I can learn from this system, just running it from a couple of seconds. And I learned two things. One, the computer was very old. Two, I learned where the files were stored that were so important for this database. And three, I learned what the program was called that they were using. They were using this version of FileMaker. I think they were using version 7 or version 8, something along those lines, basically. It could have been an earlier version, might have been a slightly older version, but I'm pretty certain it was no older than version 8. So with that information, before the computer died, I started at least with some idea of what I need to do for them. I told them flat out two things. One, we're going to have to get you a new computer. I told him I could build him one from scratch, but it would take a couple of days minimum to get the parts I need to and to have the time to build it. I said you might as well just go to the store and go and buy a new PC. The second thing was I told him we're going to have to even if we could, basically there's no way to get a version of there's no way basically they don't make computers running Windows XP anymore. They're all going to be running Windows 8. This was just before the Windows 10 switch. And even if we could get your old database running, I can guarantee you 100% that FileMaker is not going to be compatible with the new version of Windows. So even if they knew where their old copy of FileMaker was on disk somewhere, which I think they had lost years earlier even then, I told them flat out, it's like there's no point because it's probably not going to work in Windows XP. I'm sorry, it's probably designed to work from Windows XP and it probably won't work on Windows 8 or Windows 10 when that later upgrades. They were devastated, but they said, okay, well, let's take this step by step and let's see what's going on. So I said, fine. They go, they buy, I point out, like we go to the store, I do some personal shopping for them to get them a whole new computer. We plug the computer in, we get it running, I get the whole thing updated, it's working fine, the new computer is. So then I figured that two things have to be done. At this point, I figured I have to pull the data from the old computer and see if I can get it connected to the new computer. Now, I have a machine that can do that. So I took the old computer apart, I pulled the old hard drive from it, which was very old. It was still, I think, one of those IDE drives, if I remember correctly. But my equipment was compatible with old IDE drives. And I got the drive on life support, running on life support long enough that I could pull the 6 or 7 files that I needed to make the database run. That was all I could pull. So I at least was able to copy the database using my utilities, using my hardware. So then I needed to figure out if I could actually run them on this system. So I did a quick search on FileMaker to see if there was any versions of FileMaker, if they were still even making versions of FileMaker, so that I could use them. And they do. They do make, FileMaker is still in production. I think they were using at the time version 13. I know they've made version 14 ever since then. So FileMaker is still in production. Now, the fun part is that I had no idea of knowing even if there was version of FileMaker 13 that was available at the time. Again, they were using 13. That was the recent version. I had no idea if their old database would even be compatible with FileMaker 13. Like I said, they were written like FileMaker 8 or FileMaker 7 or something. So I ran the FileMaker database, and I tried to figure out what the heck is going on. Is there any way that I could test the files in FileMaker, the new version, to see if they would run? And I checked the website, and I found out that FileMaker does have a 30-day trial license for professionals, of which my client was certainly eligible for that license. And I told him flat out, it's like, look, I could probably get you a temporary license on the new version of FileMaker. It would only work for 30 days, but that's all we need. We only need like a couple of hours to determine if we can even get the new version to run that. If you're happy with it, you can buy the full version after 30 days or so. And he agreed with those terms. So we got some temporary licenses offered from FileMaker, where they were very good about it. We got a temporary client installed on the system, and then the moment of truth finally happened. Could FileMaker read those files? And they could. And the files worked. Now, I did have to run a transfer. Apparently, FileMaker did something between version 11 and version 12 or something, where they broke compatibility, but they did have a converter built into the newer versions. Once we ran that, I had to convert all 6 or 7 of the database files, but it worked. And I got his whole database back up and running and modernized on a whole new computer in 2.5 hours. That is one of my proudest moments in IT history, but it's not my last. And I've got a lot more stories to tell. Now, a little bit of a couple of postscripts to that story. When we bought the new computer, I insisted that they buy a backup drive along with it. So there is a backup drive running that I have set. They do actually do backups to USB. They don't know how the darn thing works, but I did have a backup utility program to run in the background so that it is backing up on a regular basis. Just in the background, they don't, so if there's any issues with it, they can just go back to an earlier version. It's not the end of the world. And I have that automatic. The other issue is that eventually it got to a point where we had to run a Windows 10 upgrade on it because it was using Windows 8. And I had discovered, to my chagrin, that FileMaker 13 apparently, or at least that version that he was using, was not compatible with Windows 10, at least not officially. And there was a new version of FileMaker available at the time, which was compatible with Windows 10. But even to purchase the upgrade license between FileMaker 13 and FileMaker 14 would still cost about another $300 or so, give or take. The software itself costs, I think, $350 to $400 or so for a new license, which is that's normal for that kind of software. But he wasn't willing to pay another $300, at least not that recently. But he said, when time comes, if I have to build a new system or get a new system, I'll pay for the FileMaker upgrade then. But that'll be in about 3 or 4 years. So I totally understood that. Needless to say, if you're going to use Windows 10 on FileMaker, make sure to get the most recent version and get a license for the most recent version, just to future-proof that kind of thing. So that is one of my IT stories, Tales from the Trenches, guys. I want to hear what you guys think about it. If you want to hear more stories, I've got plenty more. Some really good ones, actually. That was just one of my favorites. But please post a comment below and tell me what you think about it. Tell me what you think of the camera. And hopefully we'll be getting back to you with more stories in the future. So until next time, guys, my name is Maniac with GamingSuccess.net. Take care. Over and out.